The leather chair in Dr. Morrison's office squeaked as I shifted my weight, the sound breaking through Marcus's monologue about my inadequacies. 43 minutes. That's how long he'd been listing my failures as a wife without taking a single breath to consider his own. "She contributes nothing," Marcus said, his hand gesturing toward me like I was an exhibit in a museum of disappointment. Literally nothing. No income, no ambition, just floating through life on my success. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Morrison's pen scratched against her notepad. The afternoon light streaming through the Venetian blinds cast prison bar shadows across her mahogany desk. I watched those shadows instead of looking at Marcus. It was easier that way. "Nothing," he repeated, as if the word tasted sweet on his tongue. "I pay for everything. The house, the cars, her spa memberships, those expensive art classes she pretends to care about. Meanwhile, what does she do? Lunch with friends, shop, read books all day." My phone buzzed silently in my purse. I didn't need to check it to know what the message said. The transfer had cleared. All $47 million. Moving through a carefully constructed series of offshore accounts before landing exactly where I needed them. 3 years of planning, executed in the span of 72 hours, while Marcus was too busy complaining about me to notice the paperwork he'd been signing. "Evelyn," Dr. Morrison's voice cut through my thoughts. "Would you like to respond to what Marcus is saying?" I looked up, meeting her eyes. She was younger than I expected when Marcus first suggested couples therapy, maybe 40, with kind eyes that had probably witnessed countless marriages crumbling in this very room. What she hadn't witnessed, what no one had witnessed except my attorney and his most trusted paralegal, was the systematic dismantling of Marcus Wellington's entire financial empire. "No," I said softly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "I don't think I have anything to add right now." Marcus scoffed. "See? This is what I mean. No fight, no passion, no engagement with anything real. She just sits there like a beautiful statue, spending my money and offering nothing in return." His money. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. It had always been his money in his mind, inherited from his grandfather's pharmaceutical fortune. The Wellington Trust, established in 1952, currently valued at just over $47 million as of last Tuesday, currently valued at $0 as of this Thursday afternoon, though Marcus wouldn't discover that until tomorrow morning when his personal banker called in a panic. "I work 70 hours a week," Marcus continued, leaning forward in his chair. "Building my consulting firm, maintaining the family reputation, making sure we have the lifestyle we deserve. And what does she do? She reads poetry. She takes photographs of flowers. She volunteers at the library twice a month like that's some grand contribution to society." Dr. Morrison's eyes flicked to me again. "Evelyn, you're being very quiet. In our initial session, you were the one who suggested couples therapy. Is there something you wanted to address?" Oh, there was so much I wanted to address. I wanted to tell her about the 18 months I'd spent tracking down every offshore account Marcus thought was hidden. I wanted to explain how his late-night business calls with Simone from his Singapore office had led me to discover not just the affair, but the second condo in Manhattan, the secret credit cards, and the elaborate plan to divorce me while hiding his assets to avoid a fair settlement. I wanted to describe the satisfaction of watching his face 3 nights ago when he'd signed what he thought were tax documents, too distracted by his phone, probably texting Simone, to read the actual terms transferring his power of attorney to a shell corporation I controlled. I wanted to share how it felt to finally, after 6 years of playing the role of the simple, unambitious wife, take back every ounce of power he'd spent those years stealing from me. Instead, I said, I think Marcus is expressing his feelings honestly. That's what we're here for, isn't it? Honesty? Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. After 6 years of marriage, he could sense when something was off, even if he couldn't identify what. You're being weird, he said. Am I? Yes. You're too calm. Usually, when I criticize you, you get defensive. I'm trying a new approach, I replied, checking my watch. 27 more minutes until this session ended. 27 more minutes of playing the part before Marcus's entire world came crashing down. Dr. Morrison suggested last week that I should listen more and react less. I'm listening. Dr. Morrison nodded approvingly, completely unaware that she was facilitating the final act of the most elaborate revenge plot she'd ever unknowingly witnessed. That's excellent, Evelyn. Active listening is a crucial skill in marital communication. Marcus, how does it feel to have Evelyn really hearing you? Honestly? Marcus leaned back, loosening his tie. The same silk Hermes tie I'd given him for Christmas, purchased with the credit card linked to his trust fund. It feels good. Maybe she's finally growing up, taking responsibility for her shortcomings. My phone buzzed again. This time I did check it, carefully angling the screen away from Marcus. A simple message from my attorney. Package delivered to his office. Partner meeting confirmed for 9 a.m. tomorrow. I allowed myself the smallest smile. What's funny? Marcus demanded. Nothing, I said. Just a message from the library. The book I requested came in. He rolled his eyes. Of course it did, because that's what matters. Library books. Dr. Morrison cleared her throat. Marcus, I want to explore something you said earlier. You mentioned that Evelyn contributes nothing financially. Can we discuss the other ways partners contribute to a marriage? Emotional support, domestic management, social connections. Sure, Marcus said, shrugging. If she provided any of those things, that would be great, but she doesn't. Our house is cleaned by a service I pay for. Our meals are either takeout or prepared by the chef we hire 3 times a week. I pay for that too. Social connections? She barely knows my business associates. When we host dinners, which is rare because she hates entertaining, she sits in the corner looking uncomfortable. Every word he spoke was technically true, and every word was part of the persona I'd carefully crafted the moment I'd discovered his affair 14 months ago. The woman he was describing, the useless, passive, decorative wife, was a character I'd created specifically to make him comfortable, complacent, and careless. The real Evelyn Chen, the woman I'd been before I met Marcus Wellington, had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in international finance. She'd spent 3 years working for one of the top forensic accounting firms in New York, specializing in finding hidden assets in complex divorce cases. She'd helped dozens of wronged spouses recover millions in concealed wealth. Then she'd met Marcus at a charity fundraiser, been swept off her feet by his charm and his seemingly genuine interest in her intelligence, and made the catastrophic mistake of believing that love could coexist with complete honesty. I told him everything about my career, my skills, my ambitions. 3 months into our marriage, he'd convinced me to quit my job. "We don't need the money," he'd said. "And honestly, darling, it's a bit awkward when people ask what my wife does, and I have to explain she helps women divorce men like me. I thought it was a joke. A self-aware, self-deprecating joke from a man who loved me enough to laugh at his own privilege. I'd quit the job, thinking I'd take a few months off and then find something else. Maybe start my own consulting firm. Instead, Marcus had systematically isolated me from my professional network, encouraging me to focus on my hobbies and not stress about money. Within a year, I'd transformed from a sharp-minded financial investigator into the exact type of woman I'd spent years helping, someone financially dependent, professionally disconnected, and vulnerable. Or so he thought. "Dr. Morrison," I said, interrupting Marcus's latest complaint about my failure to appreciate the lifestyle he provided. "Can I ask Marcus something?" Both of them looked at me with surprise. I'd barely spoken during our 3 previous sessions. "Of course, Dr. Morin," Dr. Morrison said encouragingly. I turned to Marcus, keeping my expression neutral and curious. "When you think about our marriage, our future together, what do you see? Where do you imagine us in 5 years?" It was a trap, and Marcus walked right into it. "Honestly." He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, the same gesture he'd used when he was about to say something he knew would hurt. "I don't know if I see us together in 5 years. I'm not sure this marriage is working." Dr. Morrison's pen stopped moving. Even she, trained to remain neutral, couldn't hide her reaction to that bomb. "You're thinking about divorce?" she asked carefully. "I'm thinking about reality," Marcus said. "I'm 42 years old. I'm building a legacy. I need a partner who contributes to that legacy, not someone who drains resources while contributing nothing of value." Nothing of value. The word should have hurt. 6 months ago, they would have devastated me. Now they just felt like confirmation that every action I'd taken, every law I'd bent, every moral line I'd crossed was justified. "I see," I said quietly. "Thank you for being honest." Marcus looked almost surprised by my calm response. He'd expected tears, probably, begging, the kind of emotional breakdown that would justify his narrative of me as an unstable, dependent woman who needed him more than he needed me. "We should explore this more," Dr. Morrison said, glancing at the clock. "But I'm afraid we're out of time for today. Can we schedule a session for next week? This feels like an important conversation to continue." "Actually," I said, standing and collecting my purse, "I don't think that will be necessary." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I think you're right, Marcus. This marriage isn't working. You deserve a partner who contributes equally, someone who matches your ambition and your success. I pulled my coat from the rack by the door, taking my time with each button. And I deserve a partner who values me for more than my decorative qualities. "Wait," Marcus said, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. This wasn't how our sessions usually ended. Usually, I left in tears while he maintained his position of righteous indignation. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" "I'm saying that I've already filed for one," I replied, meeting his eyes for the first time in the entire session. "The papers will be served to you tomorrow morning at your office." I thought it would be more dignified than having a process server show up here at Dr. Morrison's office, though I suppose that would have been more dramatic. The color drained from Marcus's face. "You what?" "Filed for divorce. 3 days ago. My attorney assures me everything is in order." I turned to Dr. Macy. Dr. Morrison, who looked like she'd swallowed a goldfish. "Thank you for your time, Doctor. I think we've had our breakthrough." Evelyn, Marcus stood, his voice rising. You can't just file for divorce without discussing it with me first. That's not how this works. Isn't it? I tilted my head, allowing myself a small smile. I thought I was just following your example, making unilateral decisions about our future, speaking honestly about my feelings. Isn't that what you've been doing? This is insane, Marcus said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling Richard. Richard was his attorney, a shark who specialized in protecting wealthy men's assets during divorces. They'd been college roommates, and I'd met him exactly twice, both times at tedious dinner parties where he'd spent the evening explaining why prenuptial agreements were essential for any man of means. We hadn't had a prenup. Marcus had been too in love, too confident in our marriage, too certain that I was too simple and too dependent to ever leave him. You should definitely call Richard, I agreed, although he might be busy tomorrow morning. I understand he has a meeting with the ethics board about some questionable billing practices, something about charging clients for work that was never performed. I'm sure it's nothing, just an anonymous tip that someone felt obligated to investigate. That was a lie. Richard's billing practices were questionable, but not quite illegal, and the ethics board wasn't investigating him. Not yet. But Marcus didn't need to know that. He just needed to feel the first tremor of the earthquake that was about to level his entire life. What did you do? Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Me? I opened the office door, letting in the sounds of the waiting room. I didn't do anything, Marcus. I contribute nothing, remember? I'm just a decorative wife who reads poetry and takes pictures of flowers. What could I possibly do? I left before he could respond, walking through Dr. Morrison's waiting room with my head high. In the elevator, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for the entire session. My hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. But underneath the nerves was something else. Relief. Purpose. The satisfaction of a plan 3 years in the making finally beginning to unfold. My phone rang as I reached the parking garage. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. Then I got another call, then another. By the time I reached my car, a modest Honda Civic that Marcus always complained was beneath our station, he'd called 11 times. I waited until I was safely inside, doors locked, before I listened to the messages. Evelyn, this isn't funny. Call me back. I swear to God, if you think you can threaten me with divorce, pick up your phone right now. You're making a huge mistake. You have no idea what you're doing. I'm serious, Evelyn. This is not a game. Call me back immediately. Each message was progressively more angry, more desperate, more revealing of the man beneath the polished exterior. This was the Marcus I'd discovered slowly over 6 years of marriage. The man who needed control, who couldn't tolerate being caught off guard, who viewed any challenge to his authority as a personal attack. I deleted all the messages and drove home, taking the long route through the city I'd lived in for 6 years but had never really explored. Marcus hated spontaneity, hated wasted time, hated anything that didn't serve a clear purpose. Every route was optimized, every minute scheduled, every action calculated for maximum efficiency. I stopped at a small cafe I'd never been to and ordered an expensive latte I didn't need. I sat at a window table and watched people walking by, living their uncomplicated lives, and felt the weight of the past 3 years slowly lifting from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. We need to talk. Come home now. I took a picture of my latte, the foam art a perfect leaf pattern, and sent it back with a simple message. Having coffee. We'll be home later. 3 dots appeared immediately, indicating he was typing. then disappeared, then appeared again. I could imagine him on the other end, furious, confused, trying to figure out what was happening, why his predictable wife was suddenly behaving unpredictably. I finished my coffee slowly, savoring each sip, before driving to the house we'd shared for 6 years. The house that was currently only in his name, purchased with his trust fund 3 months before we married. The house that would soon be at the center of a very messy property division. Marcus's BMW was already in the driveway when I arrived, parked at an angry angle that suggested he'd gotten home in a hurry. Every light in the house was on. Through the large front windows, I could see him pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear. I sat in my car for a moment, checking my own phone. Another message from my attorney. He's calling everyone. Partners, family, friends. Give him tonight to panic. Tomorrow the real fun begins. Tomorrow. When Marcus would arrive at his office to find divorce papers, forensic accountants, and a conference room full of his business partners who'd been carefully briefed on certain financial irregularities in the firm's books. Irregularities I'd spent 18 months documenting, cross-referencing, and building into an airtight case. Tomorrow, when his personal banker would inform him that the Wellington Trust, the foundation of his entire identity, had been transferred out of his control and into a series of accounts he couldn't access. Tomorrow. When Simone, his girlfriend in Singapore, would receive a very interesting package containing photographs, receipts, and a detailed timeline of their affair, along with copies of the employment contract she'd signed with Marcus's firm that explicitly forbade romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates. Tomorrow. When Marcus Wellington would discover that his biggest mistake wasn't underestimating his wife's intelligence or overestimating his own cleverness. His biggest mistake was teaching me exactly how to disappear money so thoroughly that even the most sophisticated forensic accountant couldn't find it, and then not considering that I might use those skills against him. I got out of the car and walked toward the front door, my keys ready. Inside, I could hear Marcus's voice rising, arguing with someone on the phone. Probably Richard, his attorney, who by now would have received the divorce filing and was trying to make sense of the labyrinthine legal structure I'd built around this case. The door opened before I could use my key. Marcus stood there, still in his suit from therapy, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes," I agreed, stepping past him into the foyer. "We do." I set my purse on the console table, hung up my coat, and walked into the living room like this was any other evening. Like I hadn't just detonated a nuclear bomb in the center of his life. "What the hell is going on?" Marcus demanded, following me. "You file for divorce without warning. You make threats about Richard. You're acting like a completely different person." "I'm not a different person," I said, settling onto the couch. "I'm just not pretending anymore." "Pretending?" He stared at me. "Pretending what?" "Pretending to be the person you needed me to be. Pretending to be helpless, useless, decorative. Pretending not to notice the affair with Simone, or the hidden accounts, or the plans you've been making to divorce me while hiding your assets." I crossed my legs, maintaining eye contact. "Pretending I didn't know exactly what you were doing, when you were doing it, and how you planned to do it." Marcus went very still. "You knew about Simone?" "I knew about Simone 3 weeks after it started. I hired a private investigator the moment you started taking those late-night calls in your study with the door locked." I picked up a decorative pillow, examining the needlework. "Did you know these pillows cost $800 each?" You complained about the expense when I bought them, said I was wasting your money on frivolous things. But you signed off on the purchase anyway because saying no would have been more effort than just paying the bill. I don't understand what's happening right now, Marcus said, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely confused. What's happening, I explained patiently, is that you're facing the consequences of severely underestimating your wife. You assumed I was stupid because I stopped working. You assumed I was weak because I didn't fight back when you insulted me. You assumed I was helpless because I asked you to explain things I already understood perfectly well. That's insane. You're talking like you've been planning this for years. 3 years, I corrected. Since the moment I found out about Simone and realized that instead of just being a neglectful husband, you were actively planning to betray me financially as well as emotionally. Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at it, then back at me. This isn't over. No, I agreed. It's not. It's barely started. But tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day for you, Marcus. You should probably get some sleep. He stared at me for a long moment, trying to find the woman he'd married in the stranger sitting on his couch. Then he answered his phone and walked away, his voice low and urgent as he tried to salvage something from the disaster his evening had become. I stayed on the couch, listening to the muffled sound of his panic, and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd done. There was no going back now. Tomorrow, everything would be exposed. His financial crimes, his affair, his plans to defraud me in the divorce, and my role in exposing all of it. My phone buzzed one more time. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Delivery confirmed. Partnership agreement dissolved. Client extremely agitated but unable to locate funds. Recommend you secure alternative accommodation tonight for safety. It was from Marcus's business partner, David Chen. My second cousin, though Marcus had never bothered to make that connection because he never bothered to learn about my family. David, who I'd contacted 6 months ago with evidence of Marcus's embezzlement from their firm. David, who'd been waiting for the right moment to act. That moment had arrived. I stood up, collected my purse, and walked upstairs to the guest bedroom. I locked the door behind me and moved the chair under the handle for good measure. Then I sat on the bed and finally, for the first time in 3 years, allowed myself to cry. Not from sadness or regret, from relief. From the overwhelming release of carrying a secret so large it had become its own kind of prison. From the knowledge that tomorrow, when Marcus's world fell apart, I would be free. Free to be myself again. Free to reclaim the life I'd set aside. Free to start over with nothing but my skills, my intelligence, and $47 million I'd legally transferred from a trust fund that should never have been solely in Marcus Wellington's control in the first place. His grandfather, the man who'd made that fortune, had specified in his will that the trust should be shared equally among all family members. But Marcus's father had found a legal loophole, and Marcus had inherited the whole thing, cutting out cousins, aunts, uncles who'd relied on that money. I hadn't stolen anything. I'd simply corrected an injustice that had stood for too long. That's what I told myself as I lay in the dark, listening to Marcus rage on the phone in his study. That's what I would tell the judge if it came to that. That's what I believed mostly, except in the small hours of the morning when doubt crept in, and I wondered if revenge, no matter how justified, was worth the person I'd had to become to achieve it. But then I remembered sitting in Dr. Morrison's office, listening to Marcus describe me as nothing, hearing him reduce 6 years of my life to a series of expenses and disappointments. Understanding that to him, I had never been a partner, a companion, or even a person. Just an asset that had depreciated in value. Tomorrow, he would learn what it felt like to be worth nothing. To have everything stripped away. To stand in the wreckage of a life that had seemed so solid and permanent and realize it had all been built on sand. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. The sun rose over the city at 6:47 a.m., and I watched it from the guest bedroom window, still dressed in yesterday's clothes. I hadn't slept. Neither had Marcus, based on the sounds of pacing and phone calls that had continued until nearly 4 a.m. My phone alarm went off at 7 o'clock. Time to begin. I showered in the guest bathroom, dressed in a navy blue suit I'd hidden in the back of the closet for months, and applied makeup with steady hands. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked like someone I used to know. Professional, composed, ready for battle. When I walked downstairs, Marcus was standing in the kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear, yesterday's suit wrinkled and his eyes bloodshot. "I don't care what time it is in Singapore. Get her on the phone now," he snapped, then noticed me. His eyes widened slightly at my appearance. "I'll call you back." "You look different," he said. "I look like myself," I replied, pouring coffee from the pot he'd already made. "You've just never bothered to notice who that is." "Evelyn, we need to fix this. Whatever you think you're doing, it's done, Marcus. There's nothing to fix." I checked my watch. "You should get to your office. I believe you have a meeting at 9. His jaw tightened. "How do you know about that meeting?" "I know about everything. That's the part you never understood. I always knew everything." My phone rang. I answered it on speaker. "Good morning, James." "Morning, Mrs. Wellington." My attorney's voice filled the kitchen, crisp and professional. "Just confirming our 10 o'clock at my office. Will you need the full presentation, or should we proceed directly to the settlement negotiation?" "Full presentation," I said, watching Marcus's face. "I think it's important that everyone understands the complete picture." "Understood. I've sent the final documentation to your secure email. Everything's ready." "Thank you, James." I ended the call. Marcus was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "What presentation?" "You'll find out at 9, I said, collecting my purse. "I'm leaving now. I'd suggest you do the same. You don't want to be late." "Wait." He grabbed my arm as I passed. Not hard, but firmly. "You owe me an explanation." I looked down at his hand, then up at his face. "I owe you nothing, Marcus, but you're about to owe a lot of people a lot of explanations. I'd start preparing them if I were you." He released my arm, and I walked out the front door for what I knew would be the last time as a resident of that house. The drive to my attorney's office took 20 minutes. I spent them listening to Mozart and mentally reviewing the 3 years of work that had led to this moment. Every conversation recorded, every document photographed, every transaction traced. It had consumed my life, but today it would all be worth it. James Riley's office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown. His receptionist smiled at me like we were old friends, which we were now after countless meetings planning this day. "He's waiting for you in the conference room," she said. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. James stood at the head of a long table, arranging documents, while 2 other attorneys I recognized from previous meetings reviewed files on their laptops. "Evelyn," James greeted me warmly. "Ready for the main event?" "More than ready." "Good. Because I have news. Marcus's attorney Richard called me at 6 this morning, very agitated. Apparently, Marcus has been trying to access his trust fund since midnight and discovered it's gone. He's threatening to file a police report for theft. I sat down, placing my purse carefully on the table. Let him. The trust was legally transferred according to the provisions outlined in the original documentation. His grandfather specified that in the event of gross financial misconduct, the trust could be dissolved and redistributed to family members. Marcus's embezzlement from his own firm qualifies as gross misconduct. Which brings us to the second piece of news, said one of the other attorneys, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia. David Chen and the other partners executed the emergency partnership dissolution at 7 this morning. Wellington Consulting no longer exists as of 1 hour ago. The partners have reformed under a new entity, and Marcus is not included. I felt a flutter of something in my chest. Not quite guilt, but close. And the clients? All contacted and transitioned. Most were relieved, actually. Apparently, Marcus's behavior has been increasingly erratic over the past year. Several clients had already expressed concerns to David. My phone buzzed. A text from David. It's done. He showed up at the office 10 minutes ago and security escorted him out. He's on his way to you, I think. Be careful. I showed the message to James, who frowned. We should probably call building security. Give them a heads up. No, I said. Let him come. He deserves to hear this directly from me. 20 minutes later, the receptionist's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Wellington is here. He's quite insistent about seeing Mrs. Wellington. Send him in, James said, after glancing at me for confirmation. The door burst open and Marcus stormed in, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His suit was the same one from yesterday, now thoroughly wrinkled. His hair stood up in places where he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes were wild. What did you do? He demanded, ignoring everyone else in the room and focusing solely on me. My trust fund is gone. My company is gone. My partners won't return my calls. What the hell did you do? I gestured to an empty chair across from me. Sit down, Marcus. I'm not sitting down. I'm calling the police. You stole from me. I stole nothing, I said calmly. I simply executed the legal remedies available to family members when a trust beneficiary engages in financial crimes. Your grandfather was very specific about the conditions under which the trust could be dissolved. You should have read the full trust documents instead of just assuming you were entitled to that money forever. James pushed a folder across the table toward Marcus. This contains documentation of approximately $2 million in fraudulent transactions you conducted through Wellington Consulting over the past 3 years. Fake vendor contracts, inflated expense reports, client funds redirected to personal accounts. Your partners have copies of all of this. Marcus grabbed the folder, flipping through pages with shaking hands. You can't prove. I was authorized to make those payments. To your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands? Patricia interjected. The ones you set up using falsified corporate documents? We have transaction records, Marcus. We have bank statements. We have emails between you and the shell companies you created. Where did you get this? Marcus looked at me, understanding dawning. You did this. You went through my files. I did, I confirmed. Every file, every document, every password-protected folder you thought was secure. Did you know your password for everything was Wellington 52? Your grandfather's company founding year. Very sentimental, very predictable. Marcus collapsed into the chair, the folder falling from his hands. Why? Why would you do this? The question hung in the air. In that moment, I saw past the anger and the privilege to the man I'd once loved or thought I loved, the man who'd made me laugh on our third date, who'd proposed on a beach at sunset, who'd held my hand through my mother's funeral. But then I remembered yesterday's therapy session. She contributes nothing. You want to know why? I leaned forward. I'll tell you why. 14 months ago, I found out about your affair with Simone. Not from you confessing or feeling guilty, but because you were careless with your phone. I saw the messages, Marcus. My wife is just a placeholder until I can afford to divorce her properly. That's what you called me. A placeholder. He had the decency to look ashamed. So I started investigating. I continued. Just to protect myself in the divorce I knew was coming. I planned to hire a lawyer, split things fairly, move on with my life. But then I found the embezzlement, the hidden accounts, the plans you'd made with Richard to hide your assets so I'd get as little as possible in the settlement. I stood up, walking to the window. The city spread out below us, millions of people living their lives, unaware of the small drama playing out in this conference room. You spent 6 years convincing me I was worthless, I said quietly, that I contributed nothing, that I should be grateful for every dollar you spent on me. And all the while, you were stealing from your own company, cheating on me, and planning to divorce me while leaving me with nothing. So you decided to destroy my entire life, Marcus said bitterly. No. I turned back to face him. I decided to give you exactly what you were planning to give me. Nothing. James cleared his throat. We should discuss the settlement terms. Mrs. Wellington is willing to avoid pressing criminal charges if you agree to the following conditions. He slid another document across the table. Marcus picked it up with numb fingers. 1. You agree to an uncontested divorce with no alimony claims from either party. 2. You relinquish all claims to any property acquired during the marriage. 3. You cooperate fully with the reformed consulting firm's transition, including signing over any client relationships without contest. 4. You agree to a 10-year non-compete clause preventing you from working in the consulting industry. This is insane, Marcus whispered. You're taking everything. Actually, Patricia said, we're being quite generous. The trust fund money has been redistributed to your extended family members who were originally supposed to share in it. That's not Mrs. Wellington's money. It's been returned to its rightful owners. The house is being sold, with proceeds split equally between you and Mrs. Wellington. Your 401k and pension remain untouched. You'll walk away with approximately $300,000, which is more than many people have after a divorce. 300,000, Marcus repeated. I had $47 million yesterday. You had money your grandfather intended to share among 15 family members, I corrected. Money your father stole through legal manipulation. Money you've been using to fund an extravagant lifestyle while committing fraud against your business partners. That money was never really yours, Marcus. He looked at me with something between hatred and disbelief. You planned this for 3 years. You pretended to be someone else just to destroy me. I didn't pretend to be someone else, I said softly. I stopped pretending to be the person you wanted me to be. There's a difference. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. James and Patricia exchanged glances, waiting for Marcus's response. Finally, Marcus picked up the pen lying next to the settlement documents. Do I have a choice? You always have a choice, James said. You can refuse to sign, and we'll proceed with criminal charges. The DA is very interested in the embezzlement case. You'd be looking at 5 to 10 years, and you'd still lose everything in legal fees and restitution. Marcus stared at the documents for a long moment, then signed his name with sharp, angry strokes. I hope you're happy, Evelyn. I hope destroying me was worth it. I thought about that as he threw the pen down and stood to leave. Was I happy? Not exactly. Satisfied? Definitely. Relieved? Absolutely. Marcus, I called as he reached the door. He turned, and I saw the full weight of his defeat in his eyes. For what it's worth, I didn't do this to destroy you. I did this to save myself. He didn't respond, just walked out, letting the door close softly behind him. The silence in the conference room felt heavy. Well, James said finally, that went better than expected. I thought he might flip the table. I laughed, surprising myself. He's not that dramatic. Are you okay? Patricia asked, her voice gentle. Was I okay? I just dismantled my husband's entire life, redistributed his fortune, ended his career, and walked away from 6 years of marriage. I should have felt terrible, guilty, conflicted. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. I'm okay, I said. I think I'm actually going to be okay. 3 months later, the coffee shop near my new apartment had become my regular morning spot. Small, independently owned, filled with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Nothing like the sterile perfection of the house I'd shared with Marcus. I sat at my usual table by the window, reviewing job applications on my laptop. After 3 years away from forensic accounting, I was rusty, but my reputation had survived. Several firms had reached out, intrigued by the woman who'd unraveled a complex embezzlement scheme that had fooled everyone else. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Lunch next week? Want to update you on the firm. Also, Aunt Helen wants to thank you personally for her share of the trust fund. She's buying a house. I smiled, typing back, Lunch sounds great. Tell Aunt Helen I'm happy I could help. The trust fund redistribution had changed lives. Aunt Helen, who'd been living in a tiny apartment on Social Security, Cousin Michael, who could finally afford the surgery he needed, Uncle Robert, who'd lost his business during the recession and never recovered. 15 family members who'd been cut out of their inheritance now had financial security. Marcus had called that theft. I called it justice. The door chimed and I looked up out of habit, then froze. Dr. Morrison stood at the counter ordering coffee. She hadn't seen me yet. I debated leaving, avoiding the awkward conversation, but something made me stay. Maybe curiosity. Maybe a need for closure. She spotted me as she turned with her coffee, and her eyes widened in recognition. For a moment, I thought she'd pretend not to see me. Instead, she walked over. Evelyn, she said. May I sit? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. She sat, stirring her coffee slowly. I heard about the divorce. Well, I read about it. The business scandal made the news. I imagine it did. That last session, she said carefully, you knew what you were going to do. You'd already done most of it. Yes. Why did you come to therapy at all? It was a fair question. I considered my answer. Because I needed to hear him say it. That I contributed nothing. That I was worthless. I needed to hear him say it one more time so I wouldn't doubt my decision. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. And did it work? Do you have doubts? I looked out the window at the people passing by. Students rushing to class, parents pushing strollers, delivery drivers making their rounds, life going on, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in coffee shops and therapy offices. Sometimes, I admitted, late at night, I wonder if I went too far, if I became the villain in my own story. What do you conclude? That maybe there aren't villains and heroes, just people making choices with the information they have. I made my choices. Marcus made his. We both have to live with the consequences. Dr. Morrison took a sip of her coffee. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a villain. Therapy is supposed to help people communicate and heal, but some marriages are past healing. Some betrayals run too deep. He told you about the affair, I guessed. After you left that day, yes, and several other things. He was quite forthcoming once he realized his world was falling apart. She paused. He's in therapy on his own now, different therapist obviously, working through his issues with entitlement and control. That's good, I said, and meant it. He needs that. So do you, probably. What you did required an enormous amount of calculation and emotional control. That takes a toll. Are you offering to be my therapist? I asked with a slight smile. God, no. Conflict of interest. But I could refer you to someone excellent. I thought about it. Maybe. Let me settle into my new life first. Then we'll see if I need help processing the old one. Dr. Morrison stood, gathering her coffee. Take care of yourself, Evelyn. Whatever else happened, you survived. That counts for something. After she left, I sat alone with my thoughts. Survived? Yes, I'd done that. But I'd done more than survive. I'd fought back. I'd taken control. I'd refused to be the victim Marcus had tried to make me. Was it worth it? The question Marcus had asked me. My phone buzzed again. An email from one of the top forensic accounting firms in the city. We'd love to discuss a senior analyst position with you. Your experience and skills are exactly what we're looking for. When can you come in for an interview? I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago. Sharp, ambitious, independent. Then the woman I'd become during my marriage. Quiet, dependent, diminished. And now the woman I was becoming. Stronger than the first, wiser than the second, carrying the scars of both versions. Was it worth it? I typed out a response to the job offer, accepting the interview. Then I closed my laptop, finished my coffee, and walked out into the bright morning sun. My phone rang one more time. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Mrs. Wellington? This is Detective Sarah Chen from the Financial Crimes Unit. We have a few follow-up questions about the documentation you provided regarding your ex-husband's embezzlement case. Do you have time to come down to the station? Of course, I said. When do you need me? This afternoon would be ideal. We're moving forward with prosecution, and your testimony will be crucial. After I hung up, I stood on the sidewalk, people flowing around me like water around a stone. Marcus had asked if destroying him was worth it. But that was never what this was about. It was about refusing to be destroyed myself. It was about taking back the power he'd spent 6 years stripping away. It was about remembering that I was never nothing, no matter how many times he said it. And yes, it was about revenge. I wouldn't lie to myself about that. It was about making him feel a fraction of the powerlessness he'd made me feel. About giving him a taste of what it meant to have everything taken away by someone who was supposed to love you. Was it worth it? I thought about the $47 million now spread among 15 family members who desperately needed it. I thought about Marcus's business partners, freed from his toxic leadership. I thought about Simone, who'd been fired from her position but also freed from a relationship with a man who was using her. I thought about myself, standing in the sunshine, about to start a new job, living in an apartment I'd chosen, making decisions based on what I wanted instead of what Marcus would approve of. Yes, I said aloud, to no one in particular. It was worth it. An elderly woman passing by looked at me strangely. I smiled at her, and after a moment of surprise, she smiled back. I walked to my car, got in, and drove toward my future. Behind me was a marriage that had nearly destroyed me. Ahead was everything I'd fought to reclaim. Marcus had been wrong about many things, but he'd been right about one. I didn't contribute nothing. I contributed everything that mattered. Intelligence, resilience, the courage to fight back when fighting back seemed impossible, and in the end, that had made all the difference. Epilogue. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter. Handwritten, on expensive stationery, postmarked from a small town upstate I'd never heard of. Dear Evelyn, I'm writing this because my therapist suggested it might help me process what happened. I don't expect you to respond. I don't even know if you'll read this. You were right about a lot of things. I was entitled. I was cruel. I took you for granted and convinced myself you were the problem when I was the one failing us both. The therapy has been hard, facing what I did, who I was, why I thought it was acceptable to treat you that way. I don't have good answers. My father treated my mother the same way, and I swore I'd be different, but I wasn't. I was worse because I knew better and did it anyway. I'm working construction now. It's honest work, physical work, and it gives me time to think. I'm living in a small apartment and managing on the money I have left. It's humbling. It's exactly what I needed. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that what you did, exposing me, forcing me to face consequences, redistributing the trust fund, it was the wake-up call I needed. I was on a path that would have ended badly no matter what. You just accelerated the timeline. I hope you're doing well. I hope you found your way back to the person you were before you met me. That person deserved so much better than I gave. Marcus. I read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Some things didn't need responses. But that night, as I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and a book I was reading for pleasure, not duty, I felt something release in my chest. A final piece of anger letting go. Marcus was finding his way. Good for him. I'd already found mine. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.